This is the Red Alert. Civil defense information will be broadcast at 6:40.
West of the Rockies, you're on the air. Hello.
Y2K, how can we prepare?
Stop a few of their machines and radios. Throw them into darkness for a few hours.
We are fighting for our lives. My family must survive.
Food for 5 years. 1,000 gallons of gas. Air filtration, water filtration.
Coming at you from the frozen tundra that is East Central Alberta, Canada. Streaming live on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, Telegram, Rumble, and Odyssey. Welcome back to the workshop where we create community, find freedom, promote preparedness, and share success. I am Toolman Tim, and today is February the 12th, 2023, and this is episode, holy cow, 254 of the Workshop Podcast. I got to write that down so I don't get it wrong. Otherwise, I'd be screwing it up every time. So in just a minute, we're going to have RZ come on, and I can promise you it's going to be a good conversation because we got yammering on and almost missed the live start here. So we're doing good. Two quick things. I've had a few emails lately. Hey, Tim, how do we support what you do? A couple easy ways. If you're a YouTube person, watch my shit on YouTube. That's the way I make revenue. Doesn't cost you anything. Number two, if you're already shopping on Amazon and you want a way to support me, again, won't cost you any extra, and you're wondering, hey, I wonder if Tim's got a recommendation for this or that or whatever, go to toolmantim.shop, about 250 items in there. And then third, the only one that'll cost you anything out of pocket is patchofthemonth.co. So you can go buy there, $10 a month, $100 a year. But of course, you guys have heard it. You get all of the politically incorrect patches once a month, and you get added to the special top secret email list so that you're kind of at the head of the class if there's any new releases, any new products, any new deals, anything like that. And we're working on adding some new kind of perks to it. So we'll get around to that. And I just seen Jake in here said, I guess no one's watching the Super Bowl. I guess not. We got 7 people in here already. So with that, let's bring on RZ. Hang on. How are you, sir?
And just ducky, and I couldn't be more excited because when we find those of like minds and like hearts, it's always good when we get together because we're always better for it when we're together.
Absolutely. I don't know if you heard the episode I had, I think it was last week last Sunday maybe with Aiden Tate, or whenever I had him last week sometime.
I did.
Yeah.
Did you like it? Awesome.
Thank you.
I found that the chemistry that you guys had was really good. And the part I especially liked was that you two were not above asking questions. And that is the best thing. And you asked some really good questions. And one thing that always kills me is when we start talking about absolute truth and stuff like that, because we've gotten to such a point in society, in life now, and it certainly wasn't like this. I'm an old guy, right?
You told me, and you don't sound like an old guy. So
Well, yeah, people. No, I'm regularly mistaken for way younger than I am. But the thing that kills me a lot of times is that we're so afraid to actually speak our truth. Now, it's like, who are we going to offend? And it's the problem of political correctness and yada, 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 and all that. The thing is, though, is that under the intense propaganda that we're under as a society on a daily basis, that our ability to speak that truth starts to get edited in our minds before we even do it. And that's one of, either it's a asset or a deficit for me, but I have virtually no filters. So I will pretty much tell you anything that is popping through my head at any given moment. And that has not always worked to my advantage. The only thing is, though, is that, truth in the final analysis is a diamond. And no matter which way you twist it in front of you, no matter which angle you look at it from, it is a diamond. And if you can assign that to a belief that you have, or an understanding that you have about the way the world works, then you have glommed onto something that's unassailable. Because what is the hardest substance known to man?
That's true.
So
there was a good interview. I'm not sure if you're a Twilight Zone fan, but I'm going to guess you might have watched an episode or two over the years. But I love Rod Serling. I mean, he was just a gem in his way. And I can't remember who the anchor was interviewing him, but he was a well-known anchor for the time. And they were talking about, of all things, I mean, what would that have been? The 60s, I think, when that was out?
Yeah, he went from black and white TV, which would have been pre-65 was when color came through in the U.S. So he did at least a few years of black and white before that. So
they were having, this could have been something brought out of 2023, but the conversation was it was twofold. The first was being beholden to advertisers, and how, like, you could use Disney or something today, but I mean, this was back in the 60s, and he was talking about, I believe it was something along the lines of, hey, if you had like Coca-Cola as a sponsor, there might be the chance that you wouldn't have an interracial relationship on the episode, right? And so Rod Serling talked about the concept of pre-censorship. And I think that might be what you might have been alluding to there, was the fact that he wouldn't even write something into a story because he knew it would probably be cut out anyway. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. I think the area that I was going towards is that with the enormous amount of propaganda that we're subjected to on a daily basis, that it affects us in ways that we don't know.
That's true.
Where in one situation you might, if it was like me and you, and we were sitting around having a soda or what have you, and I'm a soda guy.
Yeah, so, no worries.
And if we're sitting around having a soda by ourselves, we might talk one way. And then if we were out in another group of people, we might end up talking another way. And I think at that point, when we have to edit our thinking and our thoughts and our speech due to whom we might have to be around at any given moment, then we lose as individuals. We lose as a society, because now we're editing ourselves. And I just don't see that being a good thing. I'm not talking about, just general being an asshole,
sure,
type of stuff, but I'm talking about where there would be something that you believe in and you wouldn't say it for fear of, offending somebody.
And I gotta, going back to when I was talking to Aiden and looking at kind of modernity now, people whom, exist. I think we're not very comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I think that's part of it. I got thinking about that, because even in my conversation with Aiden, the first half hour, I held back on some questions that I wanted to ask, but I didn't, because I thought, I'm not sure I want to take this interview down that path or that road. And that final half hour where we kind of beat the idea of absolute truth, and we wholeheartedly disagreed with one another, but there was no hard feelings, there was no ill will. But that kind of thing, especially the generation coming behind me, is not very comfortable with being uncomfortable in conversations.
Well, yeah, and to his credit, Aiden is very, he's a very upright, very smart guy.
Oh, he is smart. I love talking.
I mean, it's frightening, really, in a lot of respects, just listening with him and to him, and the way, you know, he has his ideas, and they're, you know, they fit him exactly, and he's not afraid to speak that. And there's so much that we end up running across now. And especially, like, let's say it's probably not as big a deal for guys like us who do our own things and, you know, pay our own way.
Right.
And, you know, that's the thing about,
oh, you still there?
No, I'm still
okay.
Here. I got derailed.
Oh, that's okay. No worries. I think we were heading down. Josh Sloan here, a PA prepper, he was on a few weeks ago.
That's what did it.
Yeah, I knew. I figured it was. Sorry, I won't. I caught him off guard, guys. So Josh said, "I'm not sure you need political government censorship when all workers are afraid to say something that will put their paycheck at risk."
And that's true. And a lot of that had to do, and think of all the propaganda that's gone on, you know, via the COVIDs, and how many people have been snapped back in their seats like kindergartners because they have to protect that thing, you know. And there were a lot of people that stepped out on faith during those times and said, you know what, I'm just not going to do it. And, you know, and a lot of us develop coping mechanisms. I took a mask, and what I did was I took and shredded it. And that it was my mocks, because I was moxing them.
Sure.
And I would roll through the grocery store, and, you know, people would give me the disgusted look and other people would give me the high five. And it ended up being a lot of interesting conversations. And there were places where it didn't work.
Yep, I believe you. I get it.
And I had to go renew my driver's license.
Oh.
And I walked into the government building wearing my mocks. And the cop looks at me and he rolls his eyes and he's like, yeah, dude, that ain't going to go. And I said, really? How come? And he's like, it just isn't. And I said, all right. So I got nothing, you know, you got anything laying around here? And he goes, yeah, here's a mask. And I said, how do you put up with it? And he's like, it's my job. It's my check.
Right.
And so I said, yeah. So we talked for a few minutes. I had more conversations with people during those times, especially, you know, being out in public, than, you know, for years and years and years, because people were waiting for somebody to validate their idea that this was all BS. And, you know, to see some grubby old dude walking through the grocery store, you know, wearing his fringy mask and doing his deal and, you know, basically daring them to do something. It's like our city council here in my little town put in the mask Band-Aid, and then they re-upped it once. And I sent off a harshly worded email to the mayor telling him that I'm not going to spend a dime in this town as long as this thing's in force. And I didn't give them a utility bill. I spent no money in this town until it was rescinded. And should they try this power play again, I've got me and 100 of my closest friends who have every intention of going to each and every store and walk in without masks and go, everybody here is going to spend $20. Can you afford to turn down $2,000 right now? At which point they're either going to decide, they're going to have to decide which side they're on.
Absolutely.
You know,
so
but that's out. needs.
Oh, that's all right. We went 15 minutes before I even introduced you. So why don't we let's slide back. Tell me who the hell RZ is at this point. How you get into podcast? I mean, just we always our tradition. First job. Yep. Go ahead.
I'm a vagabond, ne'er-do-well, rabble-rouser, biker, knife sharpener, drill sharpener, mechanic, parts guy.
Oh,
I've essentially done everything that it's pretty much has ever popped into my head to do. I had an engine building shop back in the late 80s, early 90s. I built a passel of small block Chevys and all sorts of weird stuff. I still have a project that percolates in the back of my head about a 300 horse, 300 cubic inch inline Ford 6-cylinder, which revolves around bunches of technical stuff, which nobody cares about except me.
Not sure if my brother-in-law is listening tonight, but he would be drooling right now. He is a Ford guy through and through. So yeah,
the 300 6-cylinder was, for all intents and purposes, God's perfect motor. It made 85% of its torque at 1800 RPMs. It was designed in a time when things weren't particularly efficient, but they went forever. You couldn't blow them up. That, as well as the old Hillside Hemi, the 225 slant 6.
I wish I knew more about vehicles. He talks about it, and I love him to death. And I listen politely and smile, and I've learned a lot from him over the years. I can change my own oil. I can do my own maintenance. If I pulled up YouTube, I could change brake pads and shoes and things like that. But
I'll tell you, YouTube is probably, and God forbid, it's like I'm a guy who believes in security, and I have a de-Googled phone.
Oh, cool.
And I don't, I've eliminated as much Google from my life as humanly possible, but I'll tell you, YouTube is one of the boons to humanity. I mean, I wanted to figure out if I could sharpen a potato peeler.
Yes, sir. See, I love that. So tell me how that came about and how that little journey ended up.
Well, my girlfriend came up and said, "This thing doesn't work very well anymore. Can you sharpen it?" And I looked at it and I said, "I don't think so." And I was in a furious flurry of little projects around the house, getting shit done,
Yeah, absolutely.
So in the midst of that, it occurred to me that I never looked to see if I could figure that out. And so I popped into YouTube and said, "Sharpen a potato peeler." And there's a guy there that figured it out. He just ran it across a stone, and he happened to have a stone that matched his potato peeler perfectly. He tried it and it worked. And there's a bunch of other stuff on there as well. And basically what they're telling you to do is to take the end of a spoon or something like that and run it with a little bit of pressure along the open part of it, getting both sides at once. And what that'll do is it'll raise the burr that's on the peeler itself and restore it to where it does something useful. Now, that does not appeal to me because I am OCD and I expect perfection when I do something, because I'll take the time to try to figure it out. But back to the question.
No worries.
So I did all this stuff, and about 2005, 2004, 2005, I wanted my own gig.
Okay.
So I did some research, and I decided I wanted to sharpen knives. because I like sharpening knives, because it was something that I'd done for years and years and years, and I was horrible at it. I know how to make stuff sharp. But what I didn't know was how to create a repeatable result.
Right.
So I started doing research, just like we all do. And I found these guys in Oregon, Eagle River something.
Okay.
And they had a little machine. It's a portable machine. It sits on a table, and you have little stones that you put into a fixture, and then it holds the angle, and you take and you drag it across the blade, and it has something to clamp the blade down with. So the basics of knife sharpening is you're dragging rocks across steel for all intents and purposes. So you start off with a 120, and then you bring it up to a 220, and then you bring it up to 400, and then you bring it up to 600. And every time you do that, you refine that edge. And as you go, you lose that little burr that you have, because as you sharpen over the blade, a little bit of metal kind of curls over, and that's called a burr. You can feel it with your thumb. If you pull out your pocket knife, you'll probably be able to run your finger on it, and you'll feel something that catches on your skin on one side but not the other. And that's the burr. The burr is what makes your knife not work. So eliminating the burr is, called refining the edge. So I found this machine, and I went and got it, or I sent away for it. And I was talking to the guy on the phone, and he's like, yeah, I've got a scissors rig that I need somebody to try out. And I said, well, shit, yeah, okay. So send me that. So I have the prototype for that. So I got it, and it's all in a nice little box, and I started doing this, and I started dragging my stuff around, and I would go to barbershops and pet groomers and all kinds of different places. And if they wanted their stuff done right then, I'd take and plop my stuff on the counter and sharpen up all their stuff. It got to be a hassle. And because I was out hustling business for 8 hours a day, and then I have to come home and sharpen for 4 hours, and then go back and deliver everything back the next day, and then still have to hustle for another 8 hours to get the next amount of stuff and figure out where my routes were going to be and all that stuff. But I made enough money to hold the fort down for better part of a year and a half. And then I got an opportunity to go to work in a Class 8 truck shop as a parts guy. So Freightliner dealership.
Sure.
Semi trucks. So, and that's where I've been since 2005, So I've been a parts guy since 1984.
Wow. So, okay. Everybody I've ever met, and Chris Dixon was a parts guy too. John Ritchie, a good buddy of mine, old boss of mine out east at Home Hardware, was a parts guy at one time. You guys got to be a special type of person, because there's got to be some crazy stress days there, are there?
Well, yeah. And the thing is, it's like anything else. I was a car parts guy for 20 years before I went into Class 8 stuff. And, even though you have, most of your experience is interchangeable as far as the mechanics of it, but learning the new stuff, like, what do I know about diesel engines? Nothing. Okay. So I stood on the counter and I took my beatings on a day-to-day basis for about a year. And at about a year in, I became relatively competent. And I had one thing going for me that nobody else did at the place where I was working at the time, was that I could read a wiring diagram. So my little claim to fame, the little niche that I was in, where it would make it harder for them to get rid of me because I was the only one who could read a wiring diagram. Back then, you could print a wiring diagram out, but they were on like an 8.5 by 11 page. And the entire dash of a semi in an 8.5 by 11 page. So I got really good. I started buying magnifying glasses and like those Fresnel sheets that you have like on the back window of a motorhome, so people can look out the rear view mirror and see wide angle and stuff like that. So, and I started developing that, and I figured out stuff. Like there was a particular truck, it was a Freightliner Columbia, which is now gone by the wayside. But they had a severe problem. They would take and smoke the turn signal harnesses, and nobody made a replacement harness for it. So I sat down and figured out all the components of that and built some. And I called one of my customers and said, I'm going to send you a bag of parts. Go find one of your Columbias that's got the burnt up socket. Use these parts and tell me if it works. Calls me back a couple days later. Yeah. Awesome.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So then I was the wiring guy.
And if you're the wiring guy, that's worth a lot.
Well, yeah, the only thing is that I couldn't tell you exactly how the stuff got to where I was fixing it. And that's always been the deal. You know, it's like, if you look, you can drop a V8 motor on my back step in crates, and I can put it together and it'll run. And it'll be fine. It'll last forever. The only thing is that don't ask me to design the camshaft because I have no idea. I know it's, it suck, squeeze, bang, blow, but to get all those things to work in phase is beyond me. I tell you the truth, I still think it's magic.
Yep.
And so I've been doing that for, like I say, since 2005. And then when the vid hit, being the old guy, I got sent home for a couple weeks.
Sure. Yeah, I get it.
And after 2 weeks, they said, yeah, that ain't working out. So I went back and they ensconced me in my little office and said, well, why don't you do some of this? Which turned out to be exactly what I wanted to do at that place for about 10 years. So now I'm the inventory guy. So I spend my time ordering parts and finding stuff that's lost in the big warehole. And, I dispatch all the drivers and whatnot. And, I'm generally the troubleshooter. And that suits my OCD really well because it always just was a burr under my saddle. It's like, there's no way that things can be this effed up and the inventory still turns out good every year. There's no way.
Right.
I know better. Because I got my fingers on it all the time, and I never trusted anybody to do my job for me when I was a parts guy. I always ordered all my own parts. And the thing that hurt us, they built us this big new fancy building in like 07. And then all of a sudden, after being a one-man show for as long as I was, because I would take the order, pull the parts, set it up, package it, send it off on a delivery or what have you, to having to depend on other people to do it. And it just drove me insane because I lost that control. And I still, to a greater or lesser extent, I have to work with a lot of other people, but there's a lot of stuff I can do now. I can fix something, and there's a fair chance that it's going to stay fixed for a while. And not being able to have something stay fixed is maddening.
So you sound like you're a bit like me, like you like to tackle new things and learn new things. And are you the type of guy that kind of gets into one interest and then moves to another, or have you kind of stuck with hobbies your whole life?
I pretty much, like I said before, I've done just about everything that's ever popped into my head to do. So
how do you tackle that? That's what I was kind of getting at. What's your process when you get, I don't know about you, but I kind of liken it to getting a worm in my brain or something. It's whatever I become obsessed or interested in, I then kind of have to delve into. Can you talk about your process a bit on that?
Well, when something is of interest, like I'm a motorcycle guy.
Sure.
I've been riding bikes since I was 12 years old, riding bikes on the street since I was 12 years old with my grandpa. So, and I've got I don't know how many bikes sitting here now. I got the Harley and the Honda and a couple of Yamahas. Yeah. So I got 4 or 5 bikes hanging around here in various states of disrepair. And it occurred to me is that I want a new bike. And not new to me. I want a new bike. So I had to create a process for it. And what I did is I looked around and I started thinking about what it is I want. So what does this bike have to do? Well, right at that point, we were in the midst of the big $4 a gallon gas routine.
Sure.
And I was looking at that. Okay, so that's something. It needs to get good mileage so I can ride it back and forth to work, which is 30 miles each way. And it needs to get better mileage than my Mercury. Okay. So that would be fine. Okay. What else? What else do you look for in a motorcycle? Well, motorcycles today are pig fat. And they're wide, they're heavy, they're tall, and they're not aesthetically pleasing. Bike design has not progressed in a direction that I approve of. So I'm from 350 Honda days. And, the original 750 Hondas. Sure. And I was a chopper guy.
Oh, yes.
I had a 1976 Honda Chopper, stretched about 4 inches, had a 10 over front end. I rode that thing coast to coast twice. That was a great bike. And the only thing I didn't like about it is the engine's too wide. So I wanted something narrow. And that's when I bought my Sportster, like back in 2000. I liked it because it was narrow and it was low. The only thing is, at this point in the action, the Sportster has morphed into something way beyond what it started as. Yep. It has a foot clutch hand shift. I've got a wide glide front end on it. You know, it's loud, it's noisy. You can't fire it off at 5 o'clock in the morning to ride it to work because you wake up the whole neighborhood. So that was out. So it needed to be relatively quiet, and it needed to be skinny, and it needed to be low enough where I could comfortably set my feet on the ground because I'm not real tall. So I had those things that I was looking for, and I started off researching. Where I ended up was I found a company out of India.
Yes, sir.
Royal Enfield. Now, Royal Enfield was a British brand way back in the early 1900s, but they've been producing bikes almost nonstop since like 1901 or something like that. I mean, it's, as a company, it's has great longevity. They build a bike right now, which is a 350cc single cylinder. And it looks like a proper motorcycle. It's a proper little British bike that's meant to go tootling on down an English lane. You know, and you can wear your flat hat on it and be completely do it. And it's a completely brand new engine design with few. That is my bike.
That they are gorgeous. They look exactly what I expected. An old, you know, just, I mean, they almost look like, I don't know, almost got a World War II look to them or something.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, that is my bike without the black seat.
They're gorgeous.
Yeah, and it gets, if you're riding the country lanes at 50, 55, it'll get 80 miles to the gallon.
Yes, sir.
At freeway speeds, it gets 60, 70.
Still not bad.
Absolutely.
Wow.
And I walked it out the door for under $6,000.
Are you serious?
I'm totally serious.
A brand new bike for $6,000.
Yeah.
Under $6,000. Wow. Why aren't they a bigger deal in North America?
Nobody knows about them except you do now.
I do. Never been a motorcycle guy, but my God, that's a beautiful bike.
It is. And it's a completely modern design. It's oil cooled. It has a little more electrics than I'd like. It's got it's got an O2 sensor and a rudimentary computer.
Okay.
And of course, but it's got a 3-year unlimited mile warranty. And then, of course, it threw an O2 sensor fault on me towards the end of the season. So it's got to go in to get looked at. But it still runs. I went out and started it yesterday just because I wanted to hear it run.
That's cool.
Those are the things that make what we do worthwhile.
Absolutely.
When you can walk out and, you know, you can thumb it and it pops off, you know, it would be better if it was a kickstart.
Yep.
You know, but no, it's not. And that's fine. I can get over that.
Goofy Roofy said fuel prices will make us a lot of us into bike guys in the future.
And maybe so, you know, and I don't see a real problem with that because, well, part of what makes me now and part of my influence as I was a lad was that I hung out with bikers.
Sure.
And there was something that you could always take to the bank when you were dealing with bikers is that they would always tell you the truth unless there was money involved. But
I love it.
98% of the time, if you're talking with any biker, pretty much all over the place, and you ask them something, they'll just tell you the truth. It'll just, they don't have any filters. And so, and I treasured that. I didn't even know why. But fundamentally, it seemed to me that this was a better way to live my life, or a better philosophy for life than what I'd done before. You know, I'd always felt that I was a victim of expectation.
Sure.
Or a victim of potential. I think really more than anything else, because, you know, you would get the talk, you know, it's like, well, you have such potential.
Oh my God. Listen, I'm telling, that's a hard thing to overcome, because I spent, you know, my formative years, you know, mom and dad would always say, well, you could do anything you want, be a lawyer, be a doctor. But you know what? I friggin' loved what I did. And a person, I don't know, you know, I always quote about Eminem from the 8 Mile, and a lot of people are like, what the hell is he going to say here? But there's a time where he says a person has to stop living up here and start living down here. And I kind of repurpose that, because I'm not talking about, you know, living in the gutter. I just think it means doing what makes you happy and content, not what everybody else thinks. Hey?
Yeah, that has great value. And most of us have been programmed, once again, in quotations, most of us have been programmed to expectations that were put on us, or we accepted, not knowing that they were being put on us. And getting free of those expectations is a lifetime journey. You know, I love the fact that you went from the Maritimes to Alberta. I think that is phenomenal. And, you know, I've done similar things, you know, not with as much writing on it as you did, but I look at you and I go, damn, this guy's all right. You know, I could sit down with this guy and smoke a cigar or what have you.
So all right. I kind of read between the lines, and obviously your avatar, you're an anarchist, right? Or
I am.
Yes. So
I'm a new anarchist, though. I'm not.
Oh.
I am sort of new to the game, although I had the leanings.
Sure, we all do.
But I couldn't really identify it completely.
So go back to your formative years and kind of trace me a path as to how you ended up as one of us. I mean,
One of us.
One of us.
One of us. Well, I think when I started hanging out with the bikers. It's like I was concerned about certain things, which I need not have been concerned about when dealing with other people, because all they were interested in is whether you would do what you say and say what you did.
Right.
If you said you were going to be there, you're going to do this, going to do that, you need to show up to do it. You need to take care of your people. You need to do this, you need to do that. And these were all things that made sense, and they were reciprocated across the family. Now, for all intents and purposes, I've been a rebel without a pause, you know, since the 60s. And each one of these steps, like when I graduated from school in 75, I said, I think I'm going to take 10 years off and see how much trouble I can get into. And I did. And it turned into more like 20. And I did all kinds of cool stuff. And like I said, I've done just about everything that's ever popped into my head to do, and I don't regret any of it.
That's awesome.
You know, there are things, relationships that, you know, maybe didn't turn out the best, and you have regrets about, you know, little pieces of things here and there. And there are still times, you know, when you're thinking about, you know, what happened with this or what happened with that, and it still comes up and it still hurts. But you move along. So as I got to the end of, you know, when I walked down the last block of Party Town,
Yep.
I knew something had to change, and it wasn't going to be anybody else but me. So I had an old friend who rode, and I was working at a bike shop, and he would ride in on this nice BMW R100 RS, and he'd say, yeah, off to Chicago, RZ. See you later. Come back a couple days later. Yeah, back from Chicago, RZ. And I'm like, this dude was always calm. I was not always calm. And I asked him, I said, what's your deal, man? You know, why are you always calm? And he's like, well, I go hang out with these guys and they help me get calm. And I said, huh. And he's like, yeah. So we don't drink and we don't smoke and yada, yada, yada. And I said, oh, well, something's got to change. Why don't you take me to one of these things? So I went. And I went to my very first AA meeting.
Oh.
And it was the most frightening thing I have ever done, because I walked into a room with 100 people in it. And every one of them had that dumb ass shit eating AA grin on their faces. And every one of them was glad to see me. And it's like, dude, you don't even know me. And it's like, and I know, because I have a life full of experience, that for one, there ain't 100 happy people in the world. And two, if there is, they ain't in a church basement in Wayzata on a Monday night. So I just chalked them up to being aliens, really. But I hung around. And stuff started to work. I worked. I worked on me. They worked on me. And as time went on, I became calmer. And as that happened, I began to discover discernment. Where before I was strictly reacting to life. And whatever new tragedy was on my way or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I began to be able to stop and consider things. And dude, I was messed up. I mean, you know, I worked at this bike shop in North Minneapolis, and the owner named me Animal.
Oh, wow.
He's like, we were in Reno working a bike show. We changed tires on bikes at touring rallies.
Okay.
And we'd gotten there. We got set up. We worked. We went to the casinos. We got hammered. We got back at the hotel at like 4 a.m. At 7 we were up and humping it again. And I was sitting there, I was busting a tire off a Goldwing with one hand. And he's like, nobody can drink that much. And nobody can work that hard after that. And it's like, your name is Animal. It's like, cool, I'm good. So one of many names in many places. But things, you know, aren't always as they seem. I mean, I'm the result of a lot of people that actually gave a shit over a number of years, which allowed me to give something back. one thing at a time. And as that went on, I began to learn that discernment, and I began to learn to have a process. And I learned to look for things that weren't necessarily what you would look at in front of your eyes at any given moment, if you know what I mean. It's like, what kind of house furnace do you have?
Forced air.
Okay.
Yep.
And is it natural gas?
Yes.
Okay. When you're up laying in bed, how many seconds is it when the draw motor hits before the burner lights?
So, between, I'd say 5 to 10 seconds, perhaps.
Mine's 20.
That's
but
funny.
You pay attention. You know what your furnace sounds like.
It's so true.
And there's a million other things that you pay attention to that normal people don't. And that's the gifts that we're talking about. When we get to the point where we start to understand that there's nothing that's going on that's more important than what's going on right now. There is no other point to my life than being here with you right now. This is exactly what I'm supposed to do. I've waited my whole freaking life to be here. Everything I've ever done, every person I've ever met, anybody I've ever helped, anybody who's ever helped me has made me ready to be here right now. And it's that way for you. And it's that way for everybody. I mean, these guys in our little Telegram group are phenomenal.
Yep.
I understand them to a certain extent, not the understanding that I would have if we were able to sit down and do stuff, but to bring it to where each one of those things brings you to the point where you understand that personal responsibility becomes the most important thing in life. And that is the essential component of anarchism, is that you are responsible for you first. And then you're responsible for your relationships. And then you're responsible for your bills. And then you're responsible for all the other things that go into being a part of whatever the hell it is that we're all involved in. The big game, the big propaganda fest, whatever. And that's what that's how I ended up at this as I became more responsible. Now, I've been working at my gig since 2005. That's the longest job I've ever had. And I love what I do. But there is more. There's more to it. There's more that I can do. And that's what eventually led me to, I was sort of shirt-tailing anarchist for a long time, say like in the late aughts into the mid tens.
Sure. When
I discovered Lysander Spooner. So I got into Spooner, and I looked at Spooner as more of a libertarian, and my politics were moving more as libertarian as time went on. But then as time went on, there needed to be more. I needed to have a path that was exclusively mine. Something that I could be ultimately responsible for.
Right.
And that's when it opened up for me. I was always there. I just didn't know I didn't have a label for it.
Right.
And through you and Spirko and Nicole and a bunch of other people that I listen to podcasts on. And, this journey started to bring me to anarchism and understanding. And the bad thing is that we are such an infinitesimally small group who actually see, and that our lights only shine when we're together. We're just little pinpricks in the darkness. But when we get together, like this, like being on Telegram, we've all met so many people. And this is something else that I love about you, is that you've taken the time to meet the people beyond the screen. I've done that. It's like I've had this group of people that I've hung out with on the interwebs for years and years and years and years and years. And I finally decided, it's like, dude, you got some vacay now. You got good wheels. You got some dough. You need to start going and meeting these people in person. So my first trip was I went to Ohio and I met my friend Mary.
Nice.
And she's an older lady. She's passed now.
Oh.
And, well, we all do.
Sure do, yep.
And I drove to freaking Ohio, man. And it was awesome. And we went to Skyline and had chili dogs. And, we sat and talked. And then I met my friend No Way, who lives in Maine. And he is an outstanding guy. It's like he called me, we talked, and he's like, I got some venison for you. I can take and box it up and send it out. And I said, you got it now? And he's like, yeah. I said, why don't I just stop by and pick it up? So I hopped, because I go on vacation. Generally, I'm on vacation in October. So I go out driving around. So I drove to Maine and picked up some venison and drove back. It's like, yeah, what's more important? And I met my friend Smokey down in Texas. And, a few of the other people, my buddy Holger here in town. My friend Suzette's moving to Texas pretty soon, and I'm hoping I get to go see her. And my friend, all my friends, people that, we've connected, we've shared this experience, which I guess I should probably, yeah. Okay. So as this awakening happened slowly, I started a blog.
Oh, cool.
Back in, I don't know, the aughts, I would assume, I would think. And it was called The Reactionary Speaks.
Okay.
And I got a bunch of different people, it's like, I'm going to start this blog and I'm going to get a bunch of different people to write for it. Yada, yada, yada. You can still find it on the Wayback Machine. And it was fun. The only thing is that there is a disconnect between my brain and my fingers when I'm sitting at a keyboard. And I knew that wasn't the final form.
Yep.
So, and I happened upon this thing is called Blog Talk Radio.
Oh my God. That's where the Prepper Broadcast Network launched off of, I believe.
Yeah. There was tons of content on Blog Talk back in the day, saying it's probably 07, 08, 09 when I fell into it, and I hung around there for, oops.
It's all right. Don't worry about it.
That's my alarm. And I started listening to these guys, and I was starting to find people that thought the way I thought. And most of them, of course, were right-wing nut jobs and, undesirables even then. So after a couple, 3 years of hanging around their stuff, I kind of got the idea is maybe this should be something I should do. How do I do it? So I came up with a show idea, and I think what was the first iteration was Fast and Furious Fridays. Because Fast and Furious was current right then. And so the first iteration of the program was that I was going to have a panel of different people, all our friends from BTR, who would rotate in and out and talk about the events of the day and yada, yada, yada. And all I was going to do was be the pivot man and the circle jerk. So
sure. I'm good at that.
And so we did that for a while, and we had some awesome good times, and we did some really decent shows. I mean, I'll be perfectly honest with you, I've never listened to one of my own shows because I was there.
Sure.
So, but we did cool stuff. And then as BTR became, harder to use and more disgusting, and, a lot of the principles of that group sort of broke up. And I decided that BTR was no longer sufficient for my needs. So I moved to Spreaker, but I kept the same format and stuff. And I went along like that. And I had a couple other people on the network, and I do have a couple people on the network yet now. But we had, as time has gone on, people got comfortable.
Sure.
I got comfortable doing my little deal. And, it was like, and I would sit and I would have 4 people on the panel, and everybody, wanted to have their say about what was going on and yada, yada, yada. And I was just sort of like, it became more and more like herding cats.
I get that.
And
yep.
I decided that, what? It's time to burn this thing down and start over. And so that's when Saturday Free Speech Zone was instituted. And it's been just me since then. It's been a couple, 3 years, I guess.
Okay.
But Spreaker is an awesome platform. It costs me a couple $100 a year. Who cares?
Yeah.
It's like, and I understand that seems somewhat flippant if you don't have $200.
Exactly. Yep.
But I'm in a position where I do. So, and you were talking about the Rod Serling thing earlier, and it's like everything that's on my network is not monetized.
Right.
We do what we do for fun and for free. And, I understand, that it's not necessarily the way that you go around it, or that you go about it, but it's the way that's always worked best for me because I'm not beholden to anybody at
Absolutely.
that point.
I get it.
And, I've given thought to, what if I had 50,000 followers and yada, yada, yada. And it's like, would it really matter? There's something I've said for years and years and years, at the end of a show, I'll cast this little chip of a podcast out on the waves of the interwebs. Maybe somebody will find it and maybe it'll do something for them, and that's really the best you can hope for. You got to be responsible to put out your content, tell your truth to the very best of your ability, and then not worry about the results, you know? And isn't that just basically, you know, the core of anarchy?
It's so true.
So
okay. So sliding back just a little bit, when you were when you talked about kind of working your way from what might have been the libertarian mindset, and you know, I mean, because what do they say? What's a libertarian but 3 years from being an anarchist or something like that, right?
mm-hmm.
So I remember one of my favorite professors in high school, in college, Mike McNeil. He told me one time, he said, a person can't believe one thing and act differently for very long, or either your beliefs will change or your actions will match up with your beliefs. And does that kind of reflect a bit of your journey into anarchism, do you think?
I think so, in a lot of respects. A lot of times you don't really know what you believe until somebody kind of puts a light on you. And you go, well, yeah. And, you know, it was like that with you and Jack and Nicole and, you know, other people like that. And it's like, I can understand what they're saying. This is part of what I'm doing. It may not be the whole thing. But what got me to it was my friend Suzette, who turned me on to freedom cells.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So she's like, there's this thing going on. It's like freedom cells is what it's called. And it's like, look and see if they got something going in your area. And I did. And I looked at the freedomcells.org website, which is much better now
Yep.
than it used to be, because it used to be a total pile, and it's not so much of a pile anymore. But I ended up finding our local group here was just starting out about the time that she had brought it up to me. So I found their Telegram group and got in the Telegram group, and there was a potluck coming up at a park over in St. Paul. So I figured, well, what the hell? Let's go check these guys out and see what they got going on. And so I went and bought a big tray of chicken wings. That was going to be my deal to bring to the picnic. And I'm still doing that 2 years later.
Were you nervous at all making that first step to go to a group of people you didn't really know, or does that not compute for you?
It bothers me for about the first 10 seconds.
Okay.
And then it's just like anybody else. You know what? I drove. I can leave whenever I want.
Yep.
So I found the pavilion where they were, and I went and I set my wings down and I looked at them. I said, so is this Freedom Cell deal? And my friend BJ looked at me and she goes, why? What are you, a narc?
Sure. I get that. Yeah.
And I said, probably not, but if I was, you'd be on my list. And that's how it starts. And I met a bunch of cool people. I met, the bunch of the people that have turned out to end up being responsible types and leaderish. And I'm sort of a free agent. I kind of wander around and I go to stuff, and we have our agoras. So I go and I sharpen knives at the agora, and I get a chance to talk to people, because that's what I really like. I like to talk to people. Mm-hmm. And it's like they're starting to get the idea now. after a year that I'm going to be here and I'm going to be sharpening stuff. So now they're bringing their stuff and they're like, well, what do you want? And I said, I don't care. Go throw something in the basket. You know, that's perfectly fine with me. What I really want from you is I want you to tell me a story. Tell me a story about how you got involved with this crazy bunch. And, you know, what's your personal view of anarchy? You know, or are you an anarchist, or are you a minarchist? Or are you any other kind of kist? You know, I don't know. And so I've met a bunch of cool people. My girlfriend's involved now. She's building homemade ginger ale.
Yes,
Now,
sir.
and that's awesome. It's super good. And she makes me homemade sauerkraut. You know, I'm an idiot. You know, I don't deserve anything cool like that. You know, and last year I wanted to grow potatoes because I haven't grown anything that's ever been successful. So I said, I want to grow potatoes. How do I do that? And so we cut up some potatoes and put them in the raised bed. And then, you know, I was like, oh, it's Farmer RZ. And yeah, that wasn't that. And it's like, and so I pulled the weeds and I buried the spuds and I did all the spudly stuff. And she gardens way above my level. And we had a lovely crop of spuds and peppers.
Ooh.
I love peppers, jalapenos, habaneros, bells, what have you. I'm super okay with peppers. And I walked in from the day and I opened the gate and I could stop at the pepper plant and pick some peppers.
Oh.
And I'd have fresh peppers for dinner. And it's like, the shit, this is awesome. How come I didn't know about that? Well, I did know about it, but I wasn't ready for it.
Right.
And I am ready for it now. And you know me, I'm going big or I'm going home. And so I've got, Spirko had this deal about using these feed troughs from Tractor Supply and putting bags in them, grow bags.
Yes, I remember.
So that's what I'm going to do. My front yard's going to be a big deal. And I got a IBC tote in the back and I'm going to try and figure out, I bought a couple pumps. Nice. So I'm going to have it, flood it, you know, flood it and then drain it and all that garbage. And, you know, and that's the most exciting part to me is getting the systems in place.
Me too.
And it's like, after it's all done, you know, you look at it and you go, well, yeah.
On to the next one.
Yeah, I got to find something else. But it's going to be so important for us, for all of us, to be able to have these skills. You know, you've got the Paul Wheaton skip thing. I think that is awesome because, you know, I'm not going to last forever. And it's like, if I have something going on, I'd like to be able to pass that on to somebody else. There was something I wanted to go ahead.
No, so I like that. I like the idea of passing it on, but I wanted to chat a little bit about stories because I personally, and I'm sure you've picked up on this, that I'm absolutely enthralled by people's stories, and I don't care how mundane they are. And I'm not even completely sure why I love to hear people's stories. So what do you, obviously, you know, you're basically trading work for stories, or, you know, I'm sure you get something else, but why are stories so powerful, or why do you love hearing stories from people like that?
When we talk to each other and we tell our stories, we're passing on a little bit of who we were at that time that story came from. You know, I could sit and I can tell you stories all day long. No big deal.
Mm-hmm.
But as you tell the story and as you listen to the story, as you're telling your story and you're telling your truth about what it is you believe and everything else, you are revealing yourself to somebody else. And isn't that the biggest crime that most of us participate in, is that we do not let people know who we are?
That's fucking incredible. I never exactly thought of it that way, but I that's cool. The fact that when you tell your story, because the thing about a story, like you said, is, you know, stories are, you know, a collection of a bunch of narratives about where you came from and what you are. But more so, I think it's kind of like a good comedy, or, you know, a good comedian, but it strips back the layers and it actually lets you see a little bit of who that person is. Hey?
Yeah. Well, and
I love it.
You can, when you are face to face with somebody, you will either rise or fall to the level of the person that you're in front of.
Amen to that.
You know? And like, I would have no trouble, you know, with you going, and I tell you, you know, a shit ton of drinking stories or whatever, you know, or bike riding stories or whatever. But the stories that we share expose us, like I'd said, and I can watch you. And as I'm telling you my story, and I can see where you're at, whether you're understanding what it is that I'm trying to put across. I had one of my fellow cellmates over this morning. He's a young guy and he needs a saw. And I happen to have a couple hand saws laying around. I said, okay, you go grab a bottle of navel jelly and we'll start restoring a saw for you.
That's cool.
And so he's the one that owns the cursed Toyota, which created the holes in my welding game and tools and stuff. So I think I completely ended up blowing that story off. So he was there and he sent me a text and he goes, I forgot the navel jelly. And I'm outside. And I said, just come on into the garage, man. You know, the garage is my sanctum sectorum.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, we'll think of something to do. So I sat and I just, I bought a drill sharpening machine.
Like for drill bits?
Yeah.
That's cool. I've never played with that. What do you think so far? How does that go?
It's awesome. I had a drill doctor back in the olden days that was given to me as a gift. Yep. That thing was just the most unusable piece of crap. I never got a drill bit. I never got one to work correctly. And I bought this little deal. I was cruising through YouTube and I found this little deal, and it's called an MR13. And it has little collets, and you put the drill in and you do this deal, and it scrapes up against a diamond wheel, and it produces lovely results. I can't tell you about how excited I am about it. I've knocked off probably 36 bits this week.
Yes, sir.
And this is part of my plan to go along with Freedom Cells. It's
Sure.
like, in addition to me hanging around and doing some sharpening and listening to stories, I'm going to have a take one, leave one drill bit thing. Because who doesn't have a box full of drill bits that
Yep.
are useless or broken or dull or nasty? Okay. I have one. It's really big. It's a big box of useless drill bits. So I'm going to sharpen all those drill bits. And then when I go to my Agora or my potluck or whatever with my fellow cellmates, I'm going to have a box of drill bits that are all nice and sharp there.
I love it.
Here is your opportunity. Take and grab the ones that you need.
Mhm.
And the next time, bring me back your dull ones, and we'll just have a drill bit library.
I love it.
So that's my next phase. And this, along with the sharpening, is going to end up being my side hustle. Because I think what I'm going to do this year is I'm going to start going to farmers markets.
Nice.
With my portable rig and just sit down and sharpen some knives and maybe find some stories. I don't know. And if I pick one particular place that I like, I'll be there all the time. And then people can get used to seeing me. And then they can bring me their stuff and I'll sharpen it for them and charge them whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But, right now it's baby steps. And as my work career comes to an end, and it's going to eventually,
Sure.
It is my intent to go to and I'm going to buy some land in Mississippi.
Nice.
And I've been scouting. And I've been setting my slider at 3 to 5 acres, 200K tops.
Okay.
And because from here in the burbs, I can turn this place over for at least that and probably a bit more. And, I'm not moving out of Minnesota until certain things happen, but a dream can't come true unless you have a dream.
Right.
And it also can't happen unless you start doing the footwork to make it happen. And this is a thing that you teach me. And this is a thing that Chris and Clark and these other guys who are way, way, way more skilled than me. I just like doing stuff. I have a mill and I bought it. It's just a little benchtop one. And I bought it so I could build 80% lowers.
Nice.
What I found out was the milling to me is way more important.
I know.
I'll sit on my chair and just mill stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Just because.
It's the process and the learning of a new skill that gets me way more excited than the end product. And I don't know, that's how I am. So that's interesting.
Yeah. But I think, and part of the end of this particular phase, I started to think about what would be the very best day I could have. What would be the very best day I could have? And for me, I think it's going to be, I want to get up, have my coffee, walk out the back door, hop on my bike, go ride around for an hour or a half hour or 45 minutes. I've actually gotten into doing just little short jumps, maybe a half hour, 45 minutes, and just go look for little tiny roads, which suit a proper British motorcycle. And maybe stop and have some breakfast somewhere along the road. Go home. Fiddle around, maybe sharpen some knives, work in the garden, do whatever. Maybe go out for another ride in the sun. And just listen to the bike and listen to the wind and listen to, the rhythm of the roads. And that's one thing about Mississippi, man. They have some beautiful roads. There's between Hattiesburg to the south and Jackson to the north, there's a strip. It's called the Pine Belt. And you could not tell, if somebody dropped you in there and you didn't know where you were, you would think that you were in northern Minnesota.
Wow.
Except it's warm.
Right. That's a bonus.
And in the summer, it's hot. But there are trade-offs. And that is like my idea of having a perfect day, is just be able to do a few simple things. Maybe go to the farmer's market, maybe do a little sharpening, maybe go hang around with, find the rest of the old fogies wherever they are, or find the local biker guys and go hang around with them. I used to be all, absorbed in image. It's like, you got to have the Harley, you got to have the big inch, you got to have this or that and all that. But, I've done all that. I don't need to do it anymore. I don't, it's like, I started riding a 350 when I really started to ride. I rode a 350 Honda, and all these 50 odd years later, I'm riding a 350 Enfield. The circle closed for me. I still have other bikes, but they have their point. Like my PC 800, water-cooled V-twin 800cc, full fairings, all the stuff. It's a beautiful little touring bike. It's the perfect size for me. And the only rule you have to observe on it is don't go more than 80 in the rain and don't do stupid shit. And I rode that thing in the rain for 2 solid weeks. And I was dry pretty much the whole way.
Wow.
My Sportster, the best description of the Sportster is that she's the rowdy girl that you pick up at the bar. Total fun, but not an everyday occurrence.
Wouldn't want to marry it.
No, you wouldn't want to. I could not live on the Sportster anymore on a consistent basis. I can't ride through traffic for 45 minutes each way with a suicide clutch and hand shifting. It's not fun for me. But it's fun to go out and be loud and raise hell and do stuff like that. That's perfectly fine. But it's not exactly who I am anymore. I'm the Sportster on some days. I'm the Honda on some days. And I'm the Enfield on some days. And maybe I'll be maybe I'll finally drag that 650 Yamaha with the mystery electrical problem out of the shed and get that thing done, and that'll be my street tracker running from the cops bike or something like that. Who knows? Life is full of opportunities but you have to be awake and paying attention to them. My brother asked me when I told him that I was going to do this, he goes, would you send me a link? And I said, well, sure.
That's
so I
awesome.
sent him a link. So, hi, John. Love you, brother.
I got a couple of, just for, I don't want to cut you off. Goofy Roofy had a couple of questions I wanted to ask you before we wind up too.
Feel free.
Well, let's start with the deeper, or why, whatever you want to call it. But they wanted to know what made you, I think you kind of expanded on it a bit, but what made you choose Mississippi over other states?
I have a friend from Mississippi, and she is stand-up. She does stuff that nobody else does, and I love her. She's my adopted daughter. She calls me dad.
That's awesome.
And if I can be within, 15, 20 miles of her, and once everything settles down and we'll have the opportunity, I told her, I said, maybe you can come out and check on the old man every month, and we'll sit down and have a tea.
And Roofy wanted to know too, if you do you follow Prepper Nurse 1 at all? Apparently he bikes quite a bit, or maybe
I do not.
No,
but I can write it down and take a look.
Prepper Nurse, and I'm thinking there's supposed to be a 1 there as well. So Prepper Nurse 1, all one word.
Is that like a Twitter handle, or?
I think that's YouTube. I'm pretty sure. Let's see if we can find it here. Oh well, Prepper Nurse 1. I see Facebook. Well, let's just see if there's a YouTube. But anyway, yeah, Prepper Nurse 1 anyway. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm a reluctant YouTuber at best, and I got kicked off of Twitter years and years ago, so I don't do that. I don't. Telegram and MeWe is about, and Float until its ultimate demise is really the only media I do, or the only social media I do.
I get it. I do. So, Mr. RZ. I wanted to get you to tell me or tell people how to find you, or how they can follow you, because I think you're going to get a few people who want to listen to you from this.
Well, maybe I will. Who knows? Here is, let's see. Will it? Oh, nope, I can't do anything.
Throw it in the private chat to me, and I'll post it in the main chat here.
That is, and that's in the private chat. That is where you can access Ideas Are Bulletproof. Currently, there's a bunch of different podcasts. Right now, it is the Saturday night free speech zone. And my friend Suzette is doing her show again. She just got done having the vid and whatnot. Mm-hmm. So she's in the midst of trying to get the hell out of California. So that's good. And I have another one of my cellmates is going to be starting a podcast on Ideas Are Bulletproof, because I've got time to fill up. And, the beauty of Spreaker is that it's 24/7. In 3-hour chunks. So I've got always, I always want to find somebody who wants to play. If you want to play, get a hold of me. I'm easy to find. You find me on Telegram. That's really the best place. Because Telegram is always on. It's on my computer never turns off.
I love Telegram. I don't know what it is. It's such a, I don't know. It's
reasonable. It's a reasonable format, I think. Yes. And one thing that you might want to look at too is that on your desktop and phone, there is a FOSS. There is FOSS Telegram, but there is also another FOSS application called Forkgram.
Okay.
And a lot of times when you get to a number of subscribers and you end up being able to when you get to have topics,
yes,
you have to have over 200 200 followers, and then you can break into topics.
Yeah.
A lot of times the Telegram app on your phone won't show you those topics.
Okay.
And Fortgram just works. And because we had our Freedom Cell group hit the deal, and then they all went topic wild.
Yeah, I get it.
Now there's as many topics as there are other things on Telegram that I follow. So, but yeah, it's cool, and it's a valuable tool. And there's so much other stuff that I could tell you about. And a lot of it is actually useful for us in the anarchy community. And, we didn't really talk about Spooner, and we didn't talk about Emma Goldman, and we didn't talk about, one guy I find totally interesting is Larkin Rose.
Yes. Yes.
And I virtually know nothing about him, but I find his little memes all over the place. And it's just fantastic. I mean, there's so much to learn.
I think if you're up for it, I should bring you back in 2 or 3 months, and maybe we'll just do a straight anarchy discussion if you'd be up for it.
Dude, I am at your disposal.
I'd love it. It's fun. I don't know. I just keep finding these people I click with, and I enjoy it. It just could sit down and pick your brain all evening, but if you're up for it, man, I'd love to have you back.
Maybe I can drag you away from your Saturday night gig and put you on the free speech zone, and we'll talk about stuff.
I would love that. Yeah, that would be even better if you want to go that route. I could, that would be awesome.
I mean, we should probably, cross-pollination. If we're spreading the flower of freedom, we need pollination.
I agree. Well, brother RZ, we have been, we killed an hour and a half and a little bit extra. So, which is great. I love it.
We hardly got started.
I know, but that's the sign of a great conversation. I realized tonight that the only thing I love more than talking is listening, at least listening to great stories and great storytellers. So thank you, brother. This was a lot of fun.
It was my particular honor, because I really, really do think that you're doing the good work, and we need to talk about tools.
That'll be the next. I promise. I knew, that is the joy of open-ended conversations. Is I love to let it lead us where it goes. And then you get a feel for the person, the first conversation. Then we can follow up with the deep shit after that,
Works for me, sir.
Thank you. Well, if you want to hang in the background for a second while I close up, I'll be right back with you real quick.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yep.
Guys, this might have been the quietest I've ever been in an episode. This was great. I appreciate, RZ is great. I didn't even, it's neat. You never know what an email is going to bring. So this conversation, this whole episode came about, I don't know, maybe a month and a half ago, when RZ sent me an email and was just kind of like, hey, Tim, would you listen to an episode of mine and give me some positive feedback or, constructive criticism? And I listened to it. I remember the day I was doing renovations at the daycare, and the episode reminded me of afternoon radio, like weekend afternoon radio on the CBC up here, the Canadian Broadcasting Channel Corporation, whatever. And it's just chill and laid back, and had a little bit of, I don't even know what the genre of music was, but it was great. And so give him a go, because what ended up happening, of course, I listened to it, fell in love with the stuff, and then, of course, asked him to come on here. So guys, you never know what connection will bring, and you don't ever think, well, maybe I shouldn't send an email. Maybe the worst that's going to happen is it goes to spam and somebody doesn't see it. So I hope you guys loved listening to RZ chat this evening. We'll have him back, and just make sure you give him a follow. I threw his link in the description ahead of time anyway. So if you're listening audio, watching the replay, whatever it happens to be, give him a like, guys. And as always, stay happy, stay healthy, and have a great week.